saying, I'm Jack. I'm the founder and managing director of Pogo. Quick caveat, I have COVID, so I'm slightly brain foggy today. So if I forget any of my words or stumble over any questions, that's why. So what I'll do is I'll quickly share my screen and kind of talk through the experience I've had of growing the company, both as a product, then into the services world, then back into the product world, and talk about some of the learnings that we've had along the way. So can everybody see my screen right now? Brilliant. So let me just minimize this. Brilliant. So to kind of kick things off, I'll give a bit of background about the company itself and the learnings we had from our original product, which was a social media app called Bounce It. So in 2016, I founded the company and we raised £100,000 through a VC down in Newcastle called North Star Ventures to grow a social media app called Bounce It. The premise of Bounce It was simple. It was to allow people to track where their content went around the planet. Anytime you were sent a photo, you could bounce this photo onto another friend. And as you can see on the map, you can see how far your content had traveled. And this was really the team as a whole's first taste in product development. And there was a few things that we did wrong during that product development when it came to how we ran the project. The first thing we did really wrong was that we didn't listen to the people that we were building it for enough. We would kind of sit in these team meetings, say, oh, wouldn't this be cool to do X, Y, and Z? And we go away and do it without really speaking to people and understanding if that was something that they wanted. And the second thing we did, which is also linked to that, is that we were really, really guilty for scope creep. So, you know, we had a launch date of 4 months after we'd originally got the money, and it ended up being about 8 or 9 months after it because we kept thinking of interesting or fun things we could put into the app. And what it resulted in was, rather than doing one thing very well, it did lots of things not so well, and resulted in us having to pivot pretty imminently because we were running out of cash to become a digital agency. So in 2017, kind of Pogo Studio was born. This was a digital agency of about 5 people at the time, and we kind of started doing work for various different companies who were mainly part of the startup incubator we were at. So lots and lots of small startups, kind of working closely with them to bring their visions to life and start helping them grow their business. And we kind of really found our feet over the next few years. We started working with some slightly larger companies. We won a project with the Royal Bank of Scotland and a design project with NatWest. We did some work with Miller Homes. And in 2019, we got the opportunity to start working with the NHS and to kind of open up this door into the digital healthcare world. So in 2019, we started talking to a very senior stroke clinician called Professor Martin Dennis, who is the chair of stroke medicine at Edinburgh University, and he's the head of stroke ward at Edinburgh Royal Infirmary. And Martin has a real interest in supporting patients with what's called shared decision making. So rather than going to a patient and telling them this is the optimal care pathway for you, this is the optimal treatment for you, they work with the patient and their family and ensure that everybody is on the same page about the treatment before going ahead with it. And he built some very, very basic software called Tailored Talks with a friend in his spare time. And the issue that they had with Tailored Talks in its form was that it was incredibly slow, incredibly clunky, and hadn't been designed with scale or user experience in mind. So if they were to try grow this throughout the NHS, they would have, you know, a lot of difficulty because it was incredibly difficult to use. So we started speaking to Martin, and with our kind of design and UX experience and with Martin's clinical experience, we kind of started building together a working team to present this to the innovations department at NHS Lothian. And after a couple of weeks of back and forth, this happened to be just as COVID was kicking off. So we started the conversation in about January, and then COVID kicked off properly through here in about March. So we were kind of able to, the NHS were keen to get some innovative new solutions through the door to help kind of with the COVID-19 response. So we were given 6 weeks to build an MVP with NHS Lothian of Tailored Talks, so to completely rebuild the system from the ground up and then start testing it within the kind of COVID-19 response. So Tailored Talks was to exist as a slide library of NHS written and approved content. And how it works is that a clinician can easily filter through all this content and build up bespoke presentations for their patients. So rather than being discharged from hospital or being diagnosed with a condition and getting, you know, a 50-page booklet and then links to websites and pamphlets that you'll never read, you're given this online portal with all your tailored information in the one place. And this was quite a lot to build over a 6-week timeline, particularly because we were responsible for managing 20 clinicians and not only NHS Lothian, but Chest, Heart and Stroke Scotland, who were funding part of the project as well. So there was probably about 5 stakeholders involved in this one project, and we had very, very little time to turn this around. So the first thing we did was we hosted some workshops around the design. Our creative director, Darren, was able to kind of map out the kind of user interface of what this would look like with some wireframes. We then took it back to them with another workshopping session and started adding some designs to it to bring it to life. Whilst we were doing that, our technical director and his development team started building the database, and we were able to kind of successfully launch the MVP in about 6 weeks, and then we were able to start growing the content library. So as things stand with Tailored Talks, we have about 3,000 slides in the system, ranging from COVID-19, stroke, 14 neurological conditions, and then we're working with Edinburgh Cancer Centre and Macmillan Cancer Support to add cancer content into it as well. And soon we'll have content on COPD, which we're hopefully going to be able to start growing throughout Scotland in the next couple of months. So I was talking about the shared decision-making and consent and how it's a nice thing to give for patients, but there's actually quite a severe problem around communication in healthcare when it comes to both clinician to patient and clinician to clinician. And you'll see down here, there's probably 5 main problems that we have, ranging from the biggest complaint that the NHS has by a long shot is a lack of clear communication. Patients feel that they're often just given the same leaflets and told to go home, read them and make their own kind of decisions about what's been happening to them. And what we're hoping to do is to give patients a much more bespoke experience when it comes to the condition they have. And then the really, really big one is the £400 million a year bill that the NHS has on informed consent related negligence lawsuits. So the most famous one was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, a case called Montgomery versus Lanarkshire, where a woman wasn't given the correct information about her a cesarean section she probably should have had. The doctor didn't correctly inform her about the risks that a natural birth would have, and it resulted in the baby being born with severe disabilities, and a huge legal case came out the back of that. And off the back of that legal case, there was a report written, and we're trying to help address some of the concerns that came out of that report by ensuring that the patients are provided bespoke information, and this is tracked and stored in the medical record. And then from the clinician to clinician point of view, 1 in 4 GP appointments could be avoided if there was correct communication and correct mapping of what's been told to a patient, between different medical pathways. So what I will quickly do now is I'll quickly, can everyone see my browser screen? Can everyone still see that? Yep. Okay, cool. So what I'll quickly do is I'll build up a tailored talk as if I'm a clinician and then show you what a patient would see when they see it. So what we'll do here is we'll build up a tailored talk as if we're a patient that's a clinician giving a tailored talk to a patient that's got COVID-19. So there's kind of some 3 main areas to the Tailored Talks dashboard over here. We've got My Tailored Talks on the left here. This is where all of my tailored talks are available. I can build up new tailored talks using these as a template and send them on to other patients. Over here, we have other tailored talks, which I have permissions to view, which I can talk about in a little bit. And over here, we've got the ability for me to tailor a talk itself. So once I open that, I can set some talk details. ProductTank talk. I can add a description to it if I'd like, and I can assign it to a department. So if it's a COVID-19 talk, we assign it to the critical care department. And then I can set different privacy settings to it, which essentially controls who's able to see the talk over here. So for the majority of talks in the system, it's just selected to only me because it only matters that I and the patient can see it. But say if I was building a talk that had fairly general knowledge in it and I wanted to share it with multiple clinicians, I could have it set to all users or users in my organization. And then once I click next, I am taken to the slide filtering window itself. So as I said, there's about 3,000 slides on the system, and we have multiple ways to find the relevant slides for the patient. So let's say the patient was in critical care and they were on breathing support and we wanted to find the relevant slides to them. We just click critical care, ICU, and then down to breathing support. And of the 3,000 slides on the system, only the relevant ones are available to us now. And it's simply a matter of clicking and adding the relevant ones to the system. If we want a bit more information about the slides, we can click the I and it'll tell us who created and approved it. Something that the NHS were really, really keen for us to build into the system was this notion of an approval date. So if it's something like smoking, where it's always been known that smoking's bad, then we don't need an approval date set to that slide. But in something like cancer care, where there's consistently the guidance is changing around the medication that's needed or the dosages that are needed, we can set approval dates to certain slide. And if the slide is out of date, the clinician who put it on the system will be notified and are told to either say that the content is still relevant or update the content itself. Another way to search for content in the system is just using our search bar. So if the patient was a smoker and they wanted to stop smoking after getting COVID-19, we would search, we would search smoking. 2 seconds, everyone. It's a classic technical demo where it doesn't work. We would search smoking and the relevant slides would be available to us here. And we just click and add them to the tailored talk as we go along. So once we've got all of our content in the talk, so out of the 3,000 slides, only the relevant ones for the patient are available to us now. We click Save and Publish, and you'll see from the 3,000 slides, there's the 14 that are relevant to the patient. There's a few things we can do here. We can either view this as a PDF. This was a really key requirement for the NHS from early on. There's a lot of places in Scotland that are quite high in technology poverty, so people don't have devices to view these on. So we made sure that they're available as a printable PDF to take home with the patient, so that they're not, not able to access this tailored guidance just because they don't have a smartphone or a computer. We can also view this as a slideshow. So we would sit with the patient and their family and talk a bit more about exactly what's been happening to them, and the kind of the advice that we're giving them. And we can also send this on to the patient in a few ways. So we can email it to them where they'll be given a link to the slideshow and the PDF, or we can send it to this patient portal that we've been developing. So the patient portal is an area for a patient in which all of their tailored talks are available. How tailored talks has been working is that a patient will get 2 or 3 tailored talks from a clinician, and then they'll be passed on to our partners in the third sector. So in this case, Chest, Heart and Stroke Scotland, who will also send them on more tailored talks. So this patient portal really acts as a place where all of their tailored guidance is in the one place, meaning they don't have hundreds and hundreds of booklets and different signposted websites. So once I log into my patient portal here, you'll see that the ProductTank talk that I've just built up is available, and we can view this on the system, or we can download it. We can also add any friends or family to the patient portal. So in the case of somebody that's had a stroke and they're not able to, understand the content in the talk because they can't read, their friends and family can be added to the patient portal as well, giving them peace of mind and making sure that there's content available to them too. So the next big project that we're working on, and the one that we're really excited about, and this has been one that's involved multiple stakeholders across, hours and hours of scoping meetings, is a long-term condition management app we've been building. So this has been built in partnership again with NHS Lothian's innovations team, Chest, Heart and Stroke Scotland, and also an organisation called Digital Health Institute. So the Digital Health Institute is an organisation that links companies like mine with public bodies such as the NHS in healthcare, and ensures that everybody's needs are listened to and everything has been correctly scoped out. Because with a project like this, which I can kind of delve into in a bit, there's it's not just an app that's released and people are able to pick up and use. We have to link this into the medical record. We have to make sure it's part of a cohesive and whole care pathway that this app is just one part of. So we need to ensure that multiple people and multiple experts, from information governance to patient groups to healthcare professionals to my technical team who are able to add guidance on how to build it, are all listened to, and everything has been correctly mapped out before we start building. So we started working with DHI in about June to start scoping out this project. How the app's going to work is it's a app that gives tailored guidance based on questions that a patient answers. So you'll see here, if the patient, for example, has long COVID, they're able to fill out this questionnaire based on how they're feeling, how their breathlessness is doing, how their mental health is doing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then based on their responses to the questions, they'll be given tailored guidance through pre-made tailored talks. And then they'll be able to request callbacks or get picked up by Chest, Heart and Stroke Scotland, who are our partners in this. So it was a really, really complex project to map out. We had to ensure that we could link the app into the medical record correctly, which involved a large organization called Storm ID. We had to make sure that patients who were suffering from long COVID were able to correctly understand the questions, and the app wasn't too overwhelming for them to read. And we also had to ensure that from the healthcare side of things, the GPs who'd be onboarding the patients were able to use the back end system that we built. So there was, I would say, probably about 5 or 6, 3 to 4 hour scoping meetings that we had before we were able to kick off the build of this. And again, like we did with the tailored talks, our design team built up some wireframes, which we were able to present to the director of NHS Lothian. Once she'd approved those, we were able to take those to the working group and kind of start fine-tuning them. And then we were able to start building the app and making all the relevant links with the medical records. So where we are now is we're about 2 weeks off this app going live. We've built it so that it can work across multiple medical conditions. So we're hoping that once this app has been proved to be successful in our pilots with long COVID, we'll be able to start moving this into stroke and cancer and other kind of care pathways. And we're also in discussions to roll this out nationally as a kind of national approach to long COVID. So throughout the kind of the moving from the product, which we did very wrong, back to the services, and then back to product, which we're trying to do a bit more correctly now, there's been a few learnings that we've had. So the first learning within the NHS in particular, empirical evidence is key. Depending on who you speak to, it's really, really difficult to try and get people to free up budget, particularly when it comes to information sharing. How the NHS works around information sharing currently is that the third sector provide all the leaflets and pamphlets and booklets that they send out. So to go to a senior clinician and say, we've got this great software, but you're going to have to pay to use it and find the budget to use it is really, really difficult if you don't have empirical evidence. And even when it comes to speaking to the people at board level that we are, we're still needing to build up these business cases and run these pilots and make sure that both patients and clinicians are giving good feedback. So we were careful to build in a feedback tracking tool within Tailored Talks that allows us to see what the average clinician rating of the platform is, and also see if there's been any feedback from the patients from the talks themselves. Within the NHS, the timelines are always longer than you think. There's projects where we've wanted to be finished after 4 months, and again, it's taken about 7 or 8 months just due to how stretched the NHS is right now and how difficult it is to get everyone in the same room. There's a project we're running with Edinburgh Cancer Centre right now that we started talking about in, I think it was October, and we're finally meeting in March to start scoping that app out, because it's been so difficult to get everybody in the same room and on board with a project like this. When it comes to kind of managing these multiple stakeholders, it's really, really important to understand where your technical knowledge lies and where their medical knowledge, or whatever field you're working in, knowledge lies. So, for us, it's, we don't want to stifle any of the ambitions for these apps, but we need to be very, very realistic on how difficult these, integrations into the medical record are going to be, for example. And we often have to push back and say, why don't we make that phase 2, is the classic one that my technical director says, because if we do make it phase 1, then it's going to push the project out by, a year. And that just makes, stuff from a business point of view and from my point of view, really, really difficult to run and manage. We spent quite a lot of time at the start identifying what the most important part of the product would be. And for clinicians, it's ease of use, because these are incredibly time-pressed people who are seeing, tens, if not hundreds of people a day trying to manage really, really difficult circumstances. And if our product takes hours and hours to use, then it's just not going to have any uptake at all. And something, a mistake we made early on, and something that we're beginning to notice right now, and I was speaking to somebody at the NHS about it, is if we were just to give this software to every clinician we could, we'd make it very, very, very difficult for us to grow the business, because they're so busy, they just forget to use it. So what we're starting to do now is we're starting to build, care pathways around Tailored Talks. So the COVID pathway, for example, has Tailored Talks at the center of it, and we're now starting to move to that with other kind of care pathways in Lothian. So ensuring that the standard way of treating a patient now will be to use Tailored Talks, or at least to use that on their discharge or when they're admitted into hospital. And having that as kind of a core way to work within the NHS is going to make life a lot easier when it comes to getting people to use our product. And finally, the different people we have on board have brought great different insights. both from a internal point of view, where we have, I know somebody sits on our board who spoke at one of these events, a guy called Paul Reed, and he's been fantastic at kind of guiding us on how we grow the product and how we change the product. And from an external point of view, having members of the third sector on our advisory kind of panel, having senior clinicians advising us, has meant that we're able to listen to all these people's experience and build the app or the software, for the people who are using it, and not make the same mistake we did in 2016, where we just, built it because we thought it would be a cool thing to build.